Her face is burned, her husband is in prison, and the baby's biological father is dead. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe to the channel and let's get this story started. Matthew had been living with Jessica for 3 years now, and things seemed to be looking good. They had overcome many hardships together and celebrated joyful moments. But lately, something had changed. Matthew noticed that Jessica had become too friendly with strange men, even in his presence. The first signs of her volatility came at a party at a friend's house. Jessica was smiling and having fun with other men, and Matthew couldn't help but notice her exchanging glances with one of them. Suddenly he began to doubt her fidelity. Matthew's doubts were growing by the day. He began to notice how she hid messages and calls on her phone, and how her behavior became more mysterious. This uneasy atmosphere in their marriage was tormenting his soul, and he decided it was time to get to the bottom of things. Matthew devised his plan. He realized that he couldn't test Jessica on his own without giving away his intentions, so he turned to his old acquaintance Steve, who was always ready to help. That evening, in a quiet corner of the bar, Matthew told Steve about his suspicions about Jessica. Steve was amazed at how Matthew was suffering because of his doubts and agreed to help his friend in testing his wife's fidelity. Matthew offered Steve the role of seducer. Steve was to drive up to Jessica in his luxury sports car, posing as a stranger, and start flirting with her and offering her a ride. The task was simple: observe Jessica's reaction and find out how much she succumbed to the seduction. Steve was hesitant at first, but realized how much Matthew needed this test. He agreed to fulfill his role in this difficult and emotionally intense test, and was willing to meet Jessica, introducing himself as a stranger. The next day, Matthew left urgently for work on a business trip for a few days. The intended test plan remained in place. In the evening, Steve drove up to the house where Matthew and Jessica lived in his red sports car. He pretended to be lost and asked Jessica for help with directions. Jessica came out of the house and greeted Steve with a smile, not knowing that he was part of Matthew's plan. They soon got into his sports car and drove through the picturesque streets of the city, and Steve began flirting, creating an atmosphere of play and teasing. Jessica didn't seem to mind his attention and even responded to his compliments. They stopped near the ocean shore. The walk quickly turned into an exciting adventure, and Jessica felt adrenaline and attraction. When they got back to the car, Steve invited her in for a glass of wine and then a dance. The music played loudly, and they danced close together. At one point, their lips came close together, and they kissed. That was the point of no return. The test of fidelity had been carried so far that they couldn't stop. Steve and Jessica spent the night together. The next day, Steve lied to Matthew, claiming that Jessica had passed the test successfully, not even speaking to him at length. Matthew was relieved and happily believed the lie. He even felt foolish for doubting his wife's fidelity. However, in secret from Matthew, Jessica and Steve continued their meetings. Jessica was torn by her feelings in a bitter conflict between her new passions and guilt before her husband. She continued to conceal her meetings with Steve, making up false stories about seeing her friends. Steve, for his part, was also captive to this dangerous bond. He found it hard to accept lying to his friend, but he couldn't stop seeing Jessica. Their relationship was growing, and they knew that sooner or later all the secrets would come out, and they would have to face the consequences of their act. For Jessica and Steve, the moment of truth came after they learned of Jessica's pregnancy. It was an unexpected turn of events that made them look at their actions from a new perspective. Jessica couldn't say with certainty who the father of the baby-to-be was, and she had to come clean. For Matthew, it was a shock, After the birth of the baby girl, Jessica and Matthew decided to have a paternity test. The results of the test were devastating. The baby girl was not Matthew's daughter. This discovery shocked them both and challenged everything they believed in. Matthew was beyond furious and frustrated, and this led to a rash and dangerous decision. In a moment of rage, he started a fire, burning Steve's sports car, where they had spent nights of passion. The fire quickly spread and engulfed the house where Stevie was sleeping. Jessica, upon learning of the fire, rushed to Steve's aid despite her own danger. In the blazing house, she suffered severe burns to her face, and Steve died in the fire. Now their lives took a tragic turn, and Matthew was arrested for arson and the murder of a friend. Jessica was left alone with a mangled face and a baby, and nothing could bring back what they had lost. Matthew found himself behind bars for 8 years. His life in prison was bleak and deprived. He lived with guilt for burning Steve's car, which led to his death, and for losing Jessica. In prison, Matthew made new friends, including people who had committed different crimes. He had to learn to survive and adapt to the new realities of prison life. Jessica, with a disfigured face, was left alone with a child. She underwent a series of surgeries to restore her appearance, but the shadows of the past never left her. She became a victim of her own mistakes and a victim of fate. Growing up without a father and surrounded by secrecy and pain, the child witnessed difficult trials. Her childhood was tainted with tragedy and difficulty. The fate of all the characters was intertwined in a tangled story, and they all paid their share of pain, suffering, and loss. There were unexpected twists and turns in their lives that changed their fates forever, leaving a bitter taste of pain and disappointment. This story reminds us how important it is to build relationships on honesty, trust, and communication. Lies and secrets can destroy even the strongest bonds and lead to tragedies. All the main characters made mistakes that led to dire consequences. The lesson is that honesty, openness, and the ability to talk to each other can prevent tragedies and save relationships. It is also important to remember the consequences of your actions and find ways to forgive and heal even after serious mistakes. That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and rate the video with a like. Thank you.